Today on the podcast, I'm excited to have Wenet from Georgia joining me. It's good to have you.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Okay, so how did you and I get connected?
My sister is a avid listener of your podcast, and so she actually listens to it all the time and told me, "Hey, there's this she's inviting folks to send in questions, and I know that you're always talking about things to me, so you should send a question in."
I
And
love it.
I did, and
What's your sister's name?
her name's Wistine.
Wistine. Shout out to Wistine. I'm so glad that you connected us. I think this is going to be a great conversation. And you're from Georgia. Tell me a little bit about your family. How many kids do you have?
I have 3 kids. My oldest is 4, a boy. My middle is 2, and then my youngest just had her last month, August 6th. So
Oh
she's
my
just turned a month old.
goodness.
Just
You
went to her doctor
have
appointment this morning.
a little one, adorable. So if we hear noises in the background, it's your cute little one joining us on this
Yes,
episode. She is so welcome.
thank you.
And I love it. Your kids are right in the age demographic for my book that's coming out called Any Day Emotions. And it's about 13 different emotions, and they link them to things in nature, especially your 4-year-old. My 4-year-old has asked me to read it to him so many times already, and we just got it in the mail. So I am looking forward to that being a resource for your 4-year-old. Tell me a little bit about what's going on in your family right now.
These little kids, they have lots of big emotions, so that book does sound perfect.
They do have
Uh,
so many big emotions for being such little people.
yeah. So for my son, just with him, obviously, first time going through everything with him age getting older every year, and I'm wondering, how do I teach my son healthy emotional regulation skills when I see that it's not necessarily modeled as well by my husband, maybe me at times. And I know that these feelings are often caught rather than taught, so just wondering how to handle that. And I
Yeah.
can give more detail, but it's been a challenge. It feels like it happens, well, every day, multiple times a day.
Yeah. Well, first of all, let's start with the caught, not taught thing because I do think that's important.
Mhm.
Um, there's a balance here because on one hand, it's true. Your modeling is the number one thing that you're doing to teach kids how to handle their emotions in healthy ways, is modeling that behavior. But I also think we're human. And parenting is part of the process that makes us better. Like we're sanctified through parenting and marriage. I mean, I have gotten, I've become such a better person because I've had to face my junk that wouldn't have otherwise come up if I hadn't been married. And then when I thought I faced as much of it as I could, I had kids, which then mirrored to me all of the things that I still need to face and heal and deal with, you
Mhm.
know? So just to start with some grace, knowing that parenting brings out things in you that God wants to heal. Parenting brings out things in your husband that God wants to heal. Even childhood wounds that might come up through marriage, through parenting, through a little bit of both. And so when these things come up to the surface, which they will, whether it's temper, anger, my husband jokes that he was never an angry person until he became a parent because all of a sudden these things come out in you that you're like, where did this even come from?
Yeah.
And I do believe that God is exposing these things so that we can face them and heal them. And so
Mhm.
I just want to kind of approach it with the cover of grace as we start because we all need it along the parenting journey. None of us are perfect. And hopefully, as these things are revealed in your husband and in you, that both of you would see it as an invitation to deeper healing. Like, God, what are you revealing that you want me to deal with, that you want me to heal? Maybe my kids are exposing this stuff, triggering it, but it's still my responsibility to heal it. So, what are you seeing in your 4-year-old that you are worried about that's concerning?
Um, I guess it's just like a lot of explosive dealing with things, and I'm trying to share, I guess, share what's appropriate without maybe throwing my husband under the bus too much.
Yeah, yeah,
I definitely don't want to do that, but I love what you said around it exposing us needing to be healed, because I definitely see that has happened more and more so with once we became parents. Um, but I really want my son to have a positive relationship with his dad slash my husband, his father.
yeah,
So I think it's just when things happen and he gets really angry and explosive and then just starts to tantrum. And I know that's really normal. I mean, I get angry, I yell, but just rather I would prefer, let's just take a step back, because I feel like he gets caught in a cycle, gets anxious, and then starts to negate everything. Um, and yeah, I feel like that's and when my husband responds to him, sometimes it's like a cycle where he'll get angry back at him, and then it just kind of perpetuates, and there's like a big blow up. So
yeah,
I think ultimately I want there to be a good, healthy relationship between them. I know that's not something I can control. I think that's maybe the the Eve in me, like the just trying to control the relationship, control my husband, and I know I need to
yeah,
surrender that. But I guess it's not really necessarily extraordinarily out of realm. It's more just I don't want to repeat patterns, and I really want them to have an open, healthy relationship, and at the as when he gets older.
yeah, absolutely. So give me an example about something recently that's kind of turned into a temper tantrum for your 4-year-old.
Um, Let me think through this. Well, um, just getting up to bedtime. We do it every day. I'm trying to think of a specific example, but I know that probably within the last week that's been an
Yeah,
issue, and he'll just start to thrash on the floor and just say, I don't want to. And then we'll say, like, well, after you do this, then we can read books. And then it's like, well, I don't want to, like, just kind of uh I can't think of an exact example like of this situation, but I know it happens often. So, and if I say, well, when you finish your bath, then we can read books. And then he'll be like, no, you won't. I'm like, we just said we would. So now are you saying I'm lying? And I'm not trying to
yeah,
not
yeah,
trying to negate him either, but it just feels like I know it's like a power struggle back and forth and back and forth.
yeah. Okay. So why would does he have any credibility when he says no you won't? Like has it ever happened that there's been an inconsistency, or do you feel like you're pretty consistent?
I feel like we stick to what we say, but I do think that in our home we have there's he, I've discovered he's probably highly like a more sensitive kid. I've learned that.
My favorite kinds.
Yeah, so and I'm actually not a
And
very
I say that sincerely. I was
really
one of
okay.
them. I have them. They feel deeply.
They feel
They
deeply.
sense things deeply. They're deeply aware. But
Yeah.
man, what God can do with that kind of a personality when it's aligned, you know?
I need to learn more about it because I'm definitely not that kind of person. And I think that's part of the struggle for me.
Yeah.
And I think both my husband and him are actually both very sensitive people. So that's probably why they're kind of the same person, actually. That's probably why there's this
Yeah.
deep feeling and then explosive outbursts with things. But
Yeah.
to answer your question, we do stick to what we say, but I will say I'm not very routine oriented. So there are times, for example, where we go to daycare and days where we don't. And sometimes he's like, what are we doing today? And I'm trying to teach him days of the week, or, oh, today it's an exception because grandparents are here. So you're going to stay up later. So I think there's a lot of guessing. And I know that with certain personality types, they do need more structure. So I do think sometimes he fights it more because of that type of stuff. Um,
Yeah. I would agree that that's a good place to start, is a
oh,
healthy routine within limits. Like we can't be so rigid,
mhm.
but when he knows what to expect, he has some level of control. Oh, look at that cutie pie. Thank you for joining us.
Hopefully she stays quiet.
She's adorable. When he's got some level of control, when he's got some level of routine, awareness, this is what's going to happen. It will help him, you know, feel like, okay, I can work with this, so that's one of the best things that you can practically start to do right away is look at your schedule and see where you can be a little bit more structured with your expectations of him every night that look the same. And maybe the time isn't the exact same. It's not like you have to brush your teeth at 9:02 exactly, but generally speaking, we're going to do this, 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 and this. And I like the idea of when you do this, then we move on to the next thing, the next fun thing, whatever that is. And I think consistency is really helpful because then he doesn't feel like he has to question, well, are you actually going to do that? Is that actually going to happen this way? So that's the first thing is just practically starting to set up a routine for him because kids his age thrive with routine for sure. And like I said, it doesn't have to be like military, but at the same time, it shouldn't just be, I don't know what's going to happen each night. I could go to bed at this time or that time. It could be 8 o'clock, it could be 10 o'clock, and every night's different. And I might get a bedtime story, I might not. Like it should be consistent. The second thing is to remember that you are setting the temperature, the emotional temperature. So when he is losing his cool, which is normal, it's going to happen. These emotions, he still doesn't know what to do with them. There's so many of them and they feel so much. And it's like he's not trained in how to navigate all of these different emotions. So he's going to look to you for what do I do with this emotion and how do I handle it? And so the best thing for you to do when he's really worked up is think my goal is to help bring him back to baseline, not to correct him, not to argue with him, not to try to get him to do what you want him to do, but the goal is to get him back to baseline. So if he's like freaking out on the floor, my goal is to comfort him and help him get back to baseline. I'm talking him through it. I'm rubbing his back. I'm saying, hey, I know you're really upset. This is what needs to happen tonight. This is the plan. We're going to sit here for a couple minutes until you start feeling better. Like your goal is to bring him back to baseline so that you can then talk him through, help him unpack what he might be feeling. And sometimes that temper tantrum is I'm just so tired. I am so tired at this point. I am not thinking clearly. So bringing him to baseline in a season like that would mean getting him to bed as soon as possible. And then in the morning, we can say, hey, what happened last night? You were really struggling. Let's talk through it and helping him make connections. Like even my 4-year-old can understand if I stay up way too late, my emotions start to feel sad and angry and annoyed and frustrated. Like there's definitely a higher level of temper tantrums at certain times of the day than others. And it makes sense because when our bodies are tired, our emotions follow suit. So sometimes it's as simple as I just need to get him to bed and then we process the next day. As it's happening throughout the day, your goal is to bring him back to baseline and then talk him through it to try to keep yourself at baseline. When I'm dealing with a tantruming child, I'm always having to check what I'm feeling and experiencing. And if my thoughts get out of check, then I start to get angry. So if I'm like, what a disobedient kid. I can't believe he's doing this. He is so ungrateful. We just took him out to the park, and this is how he treats us when he gets home. He's doing this on purpose. He is so stubborn. I'm going to get angry. If those are my underlying thoughts in that moment, I will get angry. Just like he's having underlying thoughts that are probably not accurate. I never get what I want. Mom and dad don't care. Like his underlying thoughts lead to feelings. So in the moment, as a parent, it's really about tuning in to what I'm feeling. And if I start to find myself escalating, it's like, why? What's underneath the surface for me? How do I adjust those thoughts and remember he doesn't have the tools that he needs? My job is to help him develop these skills. They don't develop overnight. My job is to disciple him and train him. He doesn't have what he needs right now, but it's my job to help him learn and grow. And when I think about it that way, I start to feel differently towards him. And I can keep myself at a level place to help him get back to baseline versus I get escalated, he's escalated. It could take hours to get back to baseline if everybody's escalated, you
Mm.
know? So your job is to help him ride that wave and then process through it.
That all makes sense. And I guess in the back of my mind, I'm wondering, I feel like I do my best to practice all that. And if that's not how my husband is operating, and I'm not saying he doesn't all the time, but I definitely don't think it's his default. I
Yeah,
guess it's a little easier for me to do that maybe because I had that experience growing up a little bit more in some cases. Uh, Regardless, I guess that's where I struggle. It's like, do I just do my part and whatever happens with my husband and him, I can't really, that's not on me to control, right? So I guess that's where I'm caught, still struggling in a way. But of course, I think that that underlying thinking you talked about does make a difference.
it does. And it's probably what your one thing that your husband needs to assess. Like, what is going on underneath the surface for me right now? You know, am I feeling disrespected? And
Mhm.
maybe that's a root wound for him, feeling disrespect, feeling betrayed, feeling rejected. Like sometimes our kids bring out these feelings inside of us that are root wounds from our past. Is the kid being disrespectful? Maybe so. But is it to the level that you're processing it and thinking, oh, he's so rude, he's disrespectful. It's probably rooted in my own wounds if I'm taking that too personally from a 4-year-old,
Mhm.
you know, because it's layered on top of an old wound. It
Mhm.
doesn't feel as bad when there's no old wound there. You know, it's frustrating, but it doesn't hurt. It doesn't feel as bad. I don't take things personally from my kids because I've dealt with some of those deeper wounds. So when I
Yeah.
see my kid being disrespectful, I think, okay, he's being disrespectful. He's gonna have to work on that. It
Yeah.
doesn't pain me the way it might pain someone who has some deeper wounding. So this is important when you are able to step in, not to take over, but to step in and say, "Hey, hun, like, why don't you take a minute?" You
Mm.
know, I think before you guys get to that escalation point, you and him should have a code word.
Mm.
Something that's not that your 4-year-old isn't aware of, but something that's a code word that reminds him, "Hey, it's getting
Mm.
too escalated. Why don't you go take a minute?" Like it gives him permission to just check out, take a minute, clock out for that moment, pull
Yeah.
himself back together. Now, can you do that 100% of the time? No, because there's two other little kids. You probably have the baby at some point, you know, or the little the middle child. Like you can't always do that, but I do think to have a code word that you're both aware of that maybe your children aren't aware of, that when you feel like it's getting to that point that you give the code word and it gives him permission to go to take a minute to himself, to go on a walk, to go to his room, to
Yeah.
take a minute to calm down and then re-enter when he's feeling a little bit more stable, is will be really helpful. And then I think, yeah, you can't control your husband, but you can influence your husband. You can control your ingredients. You can't control his ingredients. But the more work you're doing, the more it changes the whole recipe and maybe even begins to influence him to do the work.
Mm.
So I do think after the fact, it's good for you and your husband to sit down and talk. Hey, let's talk through that situation. How could we have done that better?
Yeah.
Not, hey, you're doing this wrong and this wrong and this wrong, but to really just sit down together, review the film and say, how could we have done that better? You know, what was going on with you? What was going on with me?
Mm.
And just to talk through it with each other, not just to move on as if it didn't happen. And same with kids. Talking through it isn't going to be when your husband's 10 out of 10 angry. That's not going to be the right time. He's not going to be able to receive when you're 10 out of 10 emotions, your
Hmm.
brain kind of goes offline. Your logical part goes offline. That's why it doesn't make sense to try and be logical with people who are in the middle of a tantrum, whether it's a 4-year-old or a 40-year-old, because their brain is thinking through their amygdala, not their cortex. The cortex is their logic. They're not thinking logically at that moment, they're just flooded. And so once they get back down, that's when we need to go back and say, hey, what was going on? You know? And with kids, your job is to help them get back down. Do you need a snack? Let's take a walk. Let's do this. Let's do that. Here's some options. Here's some music. Here's some things you can do. Let me give you a hug. What do I need to do to help you regulate?
Hmm.
With kids, we call it co-regulation because you're coming in and helping them regulate. Like they're attaching to you because you're regulated and they're going to learn to become regulated, co-regulation. You can't necessarily do that with adults, but that doesn't mean you can't help your husband when he's feeling a certain way. And I do think checking in later, hey, let's talk through that.
Yeah. I really love the code word idea, and also the check-in, because the way you had demonstrated it through your examples was more through asking questions, and I jumped to immediate criticism, which is a personal thing that I have to work through
Right. For
from my
sure.
history, but,
Yeah, for sure.
I think that's great, just having that code word so that I'm not saying something in front of the kids that makes him feel devalued as a father,
Right.
and then also addressing it without attacking him later. I think those are 2 things I heard you say that are
Yeah,
good.
exactly. And sometimes kids need the firmness
Mm,
of the parent, like your husband. You
yeah,
know, maybe he comes with a little bit more firmness, and sometimes kids do need that firmness. But when it's paired with anger, it's just not as effective. But
mhm,
I don't want to devalue his ability to be firm and structured and have expectations
yeah,
because he brings something to the table by bringing that parenting style. Because if you didn't have that at all, you know, it'd be a free for all. There
yeah,
has to be some order, some structure, some expectations, even when you're four. We just want to make sure it's not paired with a 10 out of 10 emotion because then it devalues what he's bringing to the table, which is some of that authority, some of that structure, some of those expectations. And so when you're processing with your husband later, you want to value what he has to bring to the table and also give him an opportunity to process what we could have done better, what we could have done differently, what he was feeling and believing in that moment, you know,
yeah,
so that you guys are more aligned. You're different, you know, parents are different,
yeah,
and you're not ever going to get him to parent just like you, but you can still be on the same page with what matters and then how to deal with these situations when it gets escalated. What's our plan?
yeah.
Does he, if he was here today, would he say, yeah, I struggle with anger and I really don't want to? Or would he be like, oh no, I think everything's good?
I think he would say the former. Yeah, he knows anger is something he struggles with, and I really like how you said kids do need the firmness, because I do see that they need it sometimes. It's not until he steps in and he says something
Right,
with this kind of firmer way of saying things that then they kind of shape up and then they get going. So I do
right.
think it's important that that exists, but yeah, if we could have that without the anger, I think that would be fantastic and it'd be perfect. And one other thing I forgot that I just want to restate it that you said was, even though I can't control him, that I'm a piece of the recipe too, and it all plays together.
Yes,
Because sometimes I feel like it's almost like we're against each other. Like I have my way of parenting, you have your way of
right,
parenting, and I don't think that's true. So coming together and coming to a place where we're both using our strengths is something I'm trying to really see also and work on myself as well.
right. And that's an important part to it so that you know, like, your ingredients matter, his ingredients matter. And maybe let's just say, like, how do these two parts work together? Let's just say you have zero structure. you're like free parenting, and then it gets to the point where it's so free that things are starting to melt down. And then he has a low tolerance for those meltdowns. And then he comes in and he's like, enough is enough. Okay, that's the equation. But what if your portion of the equation was changed? What if your ingredients changed in that you did expect a little bit more? You had a little bit more structure and routine during the day. You did have higher expectations of the kids. You did have a little bit more boundaries and rules. Then maybe we wouldn't get to that overwhelming point in the same way. Then when he steps in, it's not like 10 out of 10 chaos. So he doesn't have feel the 10 out of 10 anger, but maybe it's more like, okay, things are at a 5. We can deal with this. We can pull it back together. So that's just an example of how your ingredients actually affect the whole equation. It's just a matter of figuring out what is in my power and control. What can I own so that then my husband can own his portion? Because no matter what, he doesn't, 100% of the portion is not on him, just like 100% isn't on you, but you each have a role in the equation of how you're going to parent. And so you can help each other by focusing on the ingredients. So maybe when you have this conversation with him saying, "Hey, let's talk through some of the things that we can each do better. Here's the stuff I think I need to work on." Then he shares what he needs to work on, and you're both kind of talking through, and maybe he gives you a suggestion of what you need to work on, and maybe he invites you to give him a suggestion, you know. So you want to look at it as the full equation, because you are a team,
Mhm.
you are a team, and you both bring something positive. You both bring negatives, we all do, but we also we're an asset when we can work together in that way.
Yeah, that's fantastic, like, the way you said it, and I feel like you have been in our house because you like that like, you knew, like, what you just said where he wants more structure and sometimes I'm too unstructured. I'm not that extreme, like, I'm not free for all by any means, but he
Yeah,
has said actually to
you
me
each lean a certain way.
yeah, he said to me, the amount of freedom you give them, I'm not comfortable with, and it's much more than I was ever given." So I can completely see how you just said if I were to move more that way, then it would help
Yeah.
him to feel a little bit more comfortable.
Right. And maybe when you move a little bit this way, he moves a
Yeah,
little bit more this way, and you're not as far apart as you actually think you are.
yeah.
And that's the beauty of it. That's the beauty of parenting, is learning from each other, helping each other, relying on each other, seeing the asset that the other person brings to the table and maximizing that, having these conversations when the kids go to bed. I think a weekly check-in, this is a marriage advice, but
Mhm.
it also is helpful. My husband and I do a check-in every single Sunday night
Okay.
after the kids are in bed. And we just check in about how we're each doing personally, our personal struggles, sins, personal life, how we're doing in our marriage. And then we also will often talk about how we're doing in parenting. Like, what do we need to work on? What happened this week? How did things go? And just kind of review and chat through it. Each person kind of takes ownership of the things they're working on, wanting to focus on. So I just think having a weekly meeting like that, a weekly check-in, could be so beneficial for your marriage, but also to help you guys get on the same page with your parenting as well.
Yeah, I wrote that down.
Good. It was so nice to meet you. Thank you so much for sharing your journey and a little bit of your family with us too.
Thank you so much for your time and your advice. I really enjoyed this.
Yeah, absolutely. I hope you have a great day. Enjoy that little baby.
You have a great day. Take
Take
care.
care.
Bye.